When I saw the for sale sign in front of my house, I thought it was a mistake. It stood there, bright red against the soft green of my front lawn, swinging gently in the morning breeze like a cruel joke. For a moment, I just stood at the window, clutching my coffee mug so tight I thought it might crack. The steam rose into my face, but I didn't feel the heat. All I could see were those bold letters, for sale. It took me nearly a full minute to realize my name wasn't on the sign. Only his. Contact, Maxwell Turner, my son. That morning had started like any other. I had just fed a cat, Daisy, and was humming to myself while buttering toast, a habit I'd kept since my husband, Peter, passed away 4 years ago. The house had grown quieter since then, but I had learned to fill it with small sounds. The ticking clock, the radio humming softly, the kettle whistling when it boiled. I loved that house. We bought it in 1989, a small, white 2-story home just outside Portland. It wasn't fancy, but it was ours. Every corner held a memory. Peter building our son's treehouse in the backyard, the dent in the kitchen door from when Max rode his tricycle indoors, the faint smell of cinnamon from the apple pies I used to bake every Sunday. After Peter died, I promised myself I'd never leave. That house was my anchor, a piece of him that still lived with me. And so, when Max started visiting more often last year, I thought it was just because he missed me. At 32, Max was my only child. He was bright, charming, always quick with a joke, but a little lost, I suppose. His marriage had ended badly, and his small business had been struggling. So when he asked if he could stay for a few weeks, of course I said yes. He brought his things into the guest room, and soon the house didn't feel so lonely anymore. We'd have dinners together again, spaghetti, chicken pot pie, even Peter's old chili recipe. We talk about movies, politics, and how the neighborhood had changed. Sometimes he called me Mama, like he used to when he was little, and my heart would swell with a strange mixture of joy and guilt. Joy that he was near, guilt that I hadn't been able to help him more when his life fell apart. He'd always been the kind of man who thought he could fix everything on his own. So when he started asking questions, small, innocent ones, I didn't think much of it. Mom, he'd say, while flipping through the mail, is the house still under both your and Dad's names? I smiled. No, honey, it's just me now. Why do you ask? Oh, just curious. You know, with all the paperwork after Dad passed, I was wondering if you needed help keeping it organized. He said it so casually, so sweetly, that it didn't even register as strange. He was just being helpful, wasn't he? A few weeks later, Max convinced me to open a joint bank account for emergencies. He said it would make paying bills easier since he was staying with me. And honestly, it sounded practical. I wasn't very good with online banking, and I trusted him completely. I didn't realize it then, but little by little, he was moving pieces of my life into his hands. He started taking phone calls in the backyard, long ones, hushed tones. When I'd ask who it was, he'd wave me off with a smile. Just business, Mom. Nothing to worry about. Sometimes, he'd stay up late in the living room, laptop open, papers scattered everywhere. When I peek in, he'd close it quickly and say he was working on a new project. I wanted to believe him, because believing him meant believing I hadn't raised someone capable of hurting me. One night, I remember coming downstairs for a glass of water. It was around 2 a.m., and the house was quiet except for the faint hum of the refrigerator. I saw the glow of his laptop in the living room and his voice, low, urgent, whispering into his phone. Yes, I understand the timeline. No, she doesn't know yet. I'll handle it. The words froze me mid-step. He didn't see me standing there, half in the dark, holding my breath like a ghost. I told myself it was just business talk. Maybe he was negotiating something for his new job. But a knot had formed in my stomach that wouldn't go away. The next morning, I found him in the kitchen, cheerful as ever, flipping pancakes like he had nothing to hide. Morning, Mom. You look like you saw a ghost. Couldn't sleep, I said, forcing a smile. You were up late. Yeah, just catching up on some calls, he said, not meeting my eyes. He poured syrup over my plate, the thick sweetness dripping slowly, almost mocking me. For a brief second, I saw the boy he once was, bright-eyed, innocent, chasing fireflies in the backyard. And then, just as quickly, that image faded, replaced by the man in front of me, secretive, smiling, and slightly distant. Days passed. I tried to shake off the unease, convincing myself I was overthinking. After all, he'd been through so much, the divorce, the business failure, the move. Maybe I was just being paranoid. Then came that morning, the morning of the for sale sign. I walked outside, slippers sinking into the damp grass. My hands trembled as I touched the metal post, reading every printed word like it might explain itself. Charming family home in a quiet neighborhood. Move-in ready. Price to sell. My voice cracked as I whispered, price to sell? A wave of nausea hit me, so hard I had to grab the post to steady myself. Then from behind me, I heard the front door open, and his voice calm, casual, too casual. Oh, you saw it. I turned to face him, my throat dry. Max, what is this? He sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. Mom, I was going to tell you. I swear, I just needed to get the paperwork started first. The paperwork? I repeated, my voice barely a whisper. He looked at me, my own son, and said the words that shattered me more than anything in my entire life. I sold the house, Mom. It's already done. The world tilted. The lawn, the sky, even the chirping birds. Everything went silent. I could feel my heart pounding, so loud it drowned out everything else. That was the moment I realized something terrifying. The betrayal doesn't always come from strangers. Sometimes, it wears the face of the person you love most. And I had hadn't even begun to understand just how deep his deception went. Because that for sale sign, it wasn't just a sale, it was the beginning of my son taking everything I had left. I don't remember walking back inside that day. I just remember the sound of my heartbeat echoing in my ears, the taste of metal in my mouth, and the cold weight of disbelief pressing down on my chest. Max followed me into the kitchen, his footsteps cautious, like a child caught stealing from the cookie jar. But this wasn't a cookie. This was my life. He started talking fast, his words tripping over each other. Mom, listen. It's not as bad as it sounds, okay? The market's really good right now, and I thought maybe we could move you somewhere smaller, somewhere easier to manage. You'd be saving money. It's practical. His tone was polished, rehearsed almost, like he'd said it out loud a dozen times before. I just stared at him. We could move. I repeated. Who's we, Max? Because I don't remember you asking if I wanted to move anywhere. He sighed. Mom, I was trying to help. You're not getting any younger, and this place, it's too big for you. You're here all alone half the time. That last part hit me like a slap. Half the time, I whispered. You mean since your father died? Since you left? He looked away. The silence between us stretched, filled only by the ticking clock above the stove. Then I said the one thing I think every mother says when her heart refuses to believe what her mind already knows. Tell me you didn't do this without me knowing. He didn't answer. And that silence, that heavy, choking silence, was my answer. The days that followed blurred together like a fog. I'd wake up each morning thinking it was just a bad dream, that the sign outside would be gone. But it wasn't. Each time I looked out the window, there it stood, like a wound that wouldn't close. Max acted like everything was fine. He'd make coffee, scroll through his phone, step outside to take calls. Once, I saw him laughing with a man in a suit by the mailbox. When I asked who it was, he said, the realtor. He said it so easily, like the word didn't sting. A week later, a young couple came to see the property. I stood in the kitchen, frozen, while they walked through my living room. The one Peter and I painted ourselves the summer Max graduated high school. They smiled politely, complimented the natural light and the spacious backyard, while my son followed them, pointing things out as if it were his home to sell. I caught his eye once. He looked proud, as if he'd done something good. I wanted to scream, to throw them out, to shake him until he remembered who he was talking to. But instead, I stood there clutching the edge of the counter, nails digging into the wood, because I refused to let strangers see me break. When they left, I finally spoke. Max, what exactly have you done? He exhaled sharply, annoyed. Mom, please, don't make this harder than it needs to be. You'll have a say in where we go next, okay? I've already looked at some nice condos near Lake Oswego. They're beautiful. You'll love it. A condo. He wanted to trade 35 years of memories for a condo with white walls and a balcony that would never smell like Peter's roses. Max, I said quietly, your father and I built this home. It's all I have left of him. His expression softened for a split second, then hardened again. Mom, you still have me. Isn't that enough? I wanted to tell him no, that it wasn't enough. That love without respect is just another kind of loneliness. But my voice wouldn't come. That night, after he went to bed, I sat in the living room, surrounded by boxes he'd started packing. The air smelled like dust and lemon polish, and somewhere outside, a dog barked once, then fell silent. I opened one of the boxes, kitchen, scribbled across the top, and found Peter's old coffee mug inside. The one with the chipped rim and faded words, "World's Best Dad." My hand trembled as I traced the letters. Peter used to drink from that mug every morning before heading to work. He'd kiss my forehead and say, one day when I'm gone, promise me you'll keep this house alive. It's our story. And here I was, watching that story being erased, one box at a time. The next morning, I called our old family lawyer, Mr. Doyle. He'd been a friend of Peter's for decades. I hadn't spoken to him since the funeral, but when he answered, his warm voice nearly made me cry. Renata, my goodness, it's been a while. How are you holding up? I swallowed hard. Not well, I'm afraid. I told him everything, about the sign, the sale, the papers I never signed. There was a long pause on the line. Then he said carefully, Renata, did you give Max power of attorney when Peter passed? I blinked. I don't think so. I mean, he helped with the insurance forms and some bills, but do you recall signing any legal documents? I hesitated. My stomach turned cold. He said they were just standard estate papers. I signed what he handed me. I didn't read all of it. Mr. Doyle exhaled heavily. Renata, it's possible he's been using that authorization to make financial decisions in your name. The words hit me like a knife. I gripped the phone tighter, my fingers going numb. My own son. I whispered. I'll look into it, he said gently. Don't confront him yet. Just be careful. That evening, I sat across from Max at dinner. He was cheerful, chatting about real estate values, about how much we'd make from the sale. I watched his hands as he gestured, steady, confident, familiar. Those same hands I used to hold when he was a boy crossing the street. How do you look at your child and see a stranger? How do you measure love against betrayal? He caught me staring and smiled. What's wrong, Mom? I forced a smile back. Nothing, sweetheart. I was just thinking how grown up you've become. He chuckled. Well, about time, huh? I nodded. Yes, about time. But inside, something in me had shifted. That night, after he went to bed, I locked my bedroom door for the first time in my life. And for the first time since Peter's death, I felt truly unsafe in my own home. Because if Max could sell my house behind my back, I started to wonder what else he'd already taken from me. The next morning, I woke before sunrise. The The air was heavy and still, the kind of stillness that presses on your chest. I sat at the kitchen table with a pen and notepad, my coffee growing cold, staring at the list I'd written overnight. 1. Call Mr. Doyle again. 2. Find those estate papers Max made me sign. 3. Check bank statements. My handwriting trembled. I wasn't used to thinking this way, like a detective in my own life, but I needed to know the truth. When Max came down for breakfast, I acted normal. I smiled, offered him pancakes, asked about his day. He told me he was meeting a buyer to finalize some things, but would be home for dinner. I watched him leave from the window, that same old blue jacket, car keys spinning around his finger. He even waved at me before getting in the car. And I thought, how many times have I waved goodbye to that same hand, not realizing what it was capable of? After he left, I went upstairs to his room. I hadn't stepped in there for weeks. It still smelled faintly of his cologne, something sharp and citrusy. The bed was unmade, clothes tossed over a chair, a half-empty mug on the desk. But beneath the mess, I found what I was looking for, a small black folder tucked behind his laptop. Inside were printed emails, realtor documents, and something that made my stomach drop, copies of authorization forms with my signature on them. I didn't even remember signing most of them. At the top of one page, I read the words, power of attorney, financial and property rights. I felt my heart pound, so hard I thought I might faint. The signature, my own looping handwriting, was there, neat and trusting. Below it, Max's name, and a date, 2 years ago. 2 years ago, that would have been right after Peter's funeral, when I was still barely eating, barely sleeping, still trying to make sense of the world without him. That was when Max had brought me tea every morning, saying, Mom, I'll take care of the boring paperwork. You just rest. He had slipped that document in among the insurance forms, and I had signed it, trusting my son, not realizing I was signing away my home, my security, my independence. A sound escaped me, half gasp, half sob. I sat down on his bed, clutching the folder to my chest. The betrayal didn't feel like fire. It felt like drowning. Slow, cold, suffocating. I called Mr. Doyle right away. He picked up on the second ring, his voice steady, reassuring. I found something, I said, trying to keep my voice from shaking. The power of attorney form. It's dated 2 years ago. He sighed heavily. That explains a lot. Renata, with that document, your son legally has control over any property or asset under your name. Unless what? Unless you can prove he coerced you, or that you were under emotional distress when signing. We'd need to challenge it in court. The room spun. Court, I whispered. Yes, but first, don't tell him what you found. Let me handle this quietly. I'll start the paperwork today. We'll file a temporary freeze to prevent the sale from finalizing. I closed my eyes, tears threatening. Thank you, Mr. Doyle. Hang in there, Renata, he said softly. We'll get your house back. That afternoon, I stayed busy, anything to keep my hands from trembling. I baked cookies, watered the plants, even ironed tablecloths I hadn't used in years. But my mind was a storm. I thought about every moment Max had smiled at me, every don't worry, Mom, I'll handle it, every time I'd said, I'm proud of you. Now, each memory twisted like a knife. Around 5 p.m., I heard his car in the driveway. I slid the folder into my bedroom closet and hurried to the stove, pretending to stir soup. Smells good, he said cheerfully, setting his phone on the counter. Busy day. I glanced at the phone. A notification flashed across the screen before he locked it. Wire transfer confirmed. My heart skipped. He caught my glance and smiled. Too quickly. Just business, Mom. I forced a nod. You've been working hard lately, trying to make sure everything's in order, he said, pouring himself water. Once the deal closes, you'll see how much better life will be. I swallowed hard. And where exactly am I supposed to live, Max? He hesitated. Well, I thought maybe you could stay with me for a while. You know, until we find you something smaller. It's just financially. It doesn't make sense for you to stay here. Financially. That word had started slipping into his sentences more and more lately, like a cold stone where love used to be. That night, when he went out for a meeting, I made a decision. I wasn't going to wait quietly for my life to be sold away. I opened his desk drawer again and searched deeper this time. Beneath receipts and crumpled notes, I found a USB drive labeled House Docs. My fingers shook as I plugged it into my old laptop. Inside were scanned contracts, email threads, and most horrifying of all, a purchase agreement signed by both the buyer and Max, dated just 3 days earlier. The sale price, $420,000. The closing date, next Friday. Next Friday. That was 6 days away. And there, in the digital signature section, was my name again, Renata Turner, signed electronically. But I hadn't signed anything. Not a single word. I stared at the screen, ball rising in my throat. My son hadn't just lied. He had forged my name. That was when the tears finally came. Not loud, sobbing tears, just silent ones, the kind that burn your skin. I called Mr. Doyle again, voice trembling. He forged my signature, I said. I have proof. He didn't hesitate. Good. Keep everything. Don't delete or move a thing. I'll bring a notary and come by tomorrow morning. We'll file an injunction immediately. Then his voice softened. Renata, I'm so sorry. I nodded, though he couldn't see me. Me too. When Max came home later that night, he found me sitting on the porch, wrapped in Peter's old cardigan. He smiled, unaware of what I knew. Cold out here, huh? I nodded, eyes on the stars. A little. He sat beside me. You know, Mom, everything I've done, I did for us. I turned to him slowly. For us. He nodded. Yeah, once we sell, you'll be comfortable. I'll finally have some some breathing room. You won't have to worry about bills or repairs. It's a win-win. There was that charm again, the same easy grin that had gotten him out of trouble as a kid. But now I saw what was behind it. Desperation. He wasn't just greedy. He was drowning, and instead of swimming for shore, he was pulling me down with him. I stood up, forcing a calm I didn't feel. I hope you're right, Max, I said softly, because soon we'll both see what happens when you sell something that doesn't belong to you. He frowned. What's that supposed to mean? I smiled faintly. You'll find out soon enough. Then I walked inside, locked the door, and for the first time in months, I felt stronger than my fear. Because by the next morning, it wouldn't just be my house on the line, it would be my son's freedom too. The next morning, I met Mr. Doyle at the kitchen table. The sunlight streamed through the lace curtains, making the room feel almost ordinary, almost safe. Almost. He carried a thick folder and a notary kit. When he placed them on the table, I felt a strange mixture of relief and dread. We're going to start with a temporary injunction, he said, his voice gentle but firm. This will freeze any sale until the court can review the documents. And we'll need a sworn statement from you about the forgery. I nodded. My hands were steady this time, not because I wasn't scared, but because I knew I had no other choice. Max didn't know Mr. Doyle was coming. He was downstairs, dressed in jeans and a flannel shirt, scrolling through his phone as if nothing had happened. When he looked out and saw us at the table, he smiled. Morning, Mom. Who's your friend? This is Mr. Doyle, Max. Our family lawyer, I said, calm, almost casual. Max's brow furrowed, but he didn't panic. Not yet. Family lawyer? For what? For the house, I said simply, keeping my voice steady. And for the truth. Mr. Doyle explained the situation, the forged documents, the sale, and the legal steps we were taking. Max's face went pale, then red, then a shock. I don't understand, he stammered. I was trying to help. This isn't how it's supposed to happen. Mom, You forged my name, Max, I interrupted, my voice firm now. You didn't ask me. You didn't even tell me. And you tried to act like it was for my benefit. I didn't mean, he started again. You didn't mean, I echoed, my hands clenching into fists on the table. You sold the house I've lived in for 35 years. You sold the memories of your father. You sold everything that kept me anchored in this world. And now you expect me to thank you. He looked down at the floor. His shoulders slumped. Mr. Doyle stepped in, calm but precise. Max, the law doesn't care about intent. Forgery is a crime. And using power of attorney under false pretenses is fraud. We have evidence. You can cooperate now, or the court will handle it. Max shook his head, muttering something about just trying to make things better, but it was hollow. That afternoon, Max called his friends. His voice hurried, tense, trying to explain, to defend himself. But for the first time, the world wasn't on his side. Neighbors he had confided in, the buyers who were now on hold, everyone started asking questions. I watched quietly from the kitchen window as the small circle of confidence began to crumble. I didn't feel glee, not really. I felt relief. Relief that justice might be possible, and relief that I could finally stop feeling powerless. Over the next few days, we gathered every piece of proof, emails, signed papers, bank statements, witness statements from the realtor and neighbors. I felt like I was building a fortress around my life, brick by brick, and each brick gave me a sense of strength I hadn't felt since Peter died. I started keeping a journal again, writing down my thoughts, my fears, my anger. Sometimes, I would pause mid-entry, close my eyes, and remember the smell of Peter's coffee in the morning, the way Max used to laugh at my jokes when he was 10, the warmth of our old living room in winter. It was bittersweet, but it reminded me why I was fighting. Not just for the house, but for everything it represented. My memories, my independence, my dignity. Then came the confrontation day. Max came home late, expecting dinner, expecting me to be the same mother who trusted him blindly. I was waiting, calm, collected. Mr. Doyle beside me. He froze when he saw the lawyer. What's this? We're filing the injunction today, Mr. Doyle said, holding up the folder. You won't be able to transfer the house, sell it, or touch any funds associated with it. Not until the court decides. Max's face went white, then red. He tried to step forward, to argue, to convince, but I held up a hand. No, Max, enough, I said. I trusted you, and you betrayed that trust. This isn't about money anymore. It's about respect. It's about honesty. And right now, it's about saving what's mine. He opened his mouth, then closed it. Words failed him. I could see panic rising, confusion, a hint of fear, all emotions he had never allowed himself to feel in front of me. That evening, Max sat silently at the dining table. I cooked dinner as if nothing had changed, but every chop of the knife, every stir of the pot was deliberate, grounding me. Finally, he spoke. Mom, I didn't mean to hurt you. I know, I said, carefully measuring my words. But you did, and intentions don't erase consequences. I loved you, Max. I still do. But love doesn't mean I let you steal from me. He hung his head, the weight of his actions finally sinking in. Over the next few days, the community began to hear whispers. Neighbors who had once smiled politely now avoided eye contact. The buyers waited anxiously for updates. Max's friends, realizing he might face legal trouble, kept their distance. It was a quiet storm, social and moral pressure building around him. He wasn't being humiliated in public by me. I never wanted that. But justice has a way of finding the truth, even without shouting. And Max, my own son, was learning it the hard way. Late one night, I sat on the porch, looking at the for sale sign still standing out front. It was ironic now. A symbol of betrayal had become a symbol of my resilience. I could feel the strength returning to me, slowly but surely. I had feared that losing my home meant losing a part of myself, but I realized something essential. My home wasn't just a building. It was the life I had built, the memories I had cherished, and the courage I now had to stand for myself. And Max, well, he had a lesson coming that he wouldn't forget, because the next move I made would not just stop the sale. It would change everything between us forever. The following morning, the world outside my home seemed unchanged. Birds chirped, mail trucks rattled down the street, and the sun spilled golden light over the lawns. But inside, nothing would ever feel ordinary again. Word had spread, slowly, subtly, but undeniably. Max's actions were no longer secrets, whispered only behind closed doors. The first sign came from the neighbors. Mrs. Caldwell, who had lived next door for over 20 years, stopped by mid-morning with a basket of fresh muffins. "Renata," she said, her voice low, almost hesitant. I heard about the house. I just wanted to see how you're doing." I smiled, holding the basket. "I'm managing, thank you. It means a lot that you care." She glanced past me at the front yard, where the for sale sign still lingered like a scar. "You know," she said softly, "Max shouldn't have done that. Not to you. Not after all this time." Her words warmed me, even as they carried a quiet weight of judgment. I nodded. "I know, but thankfully it's being handled." By midweek, more people were aware. The realtor called to apologize for the misunderstanding. The potential buyers, though confused and disappointed, were cooperative once Mr. Doyle explained the injunction. Even Max's friends started distancing themselves, unsure of how far the betrayal went and how far they wanted to be involved. It was surreal to watch. My son, the boy I had held in my arms as a newborn, the teenager I had comforted through heartbreak, the man I thought I knew, was now a figure of cautionary whispers. One evening, I received a phone call from my sister, Laura, who lives across the state. "Renata, honey, I don't know if Max told you, but word's out. People are talking. Your family is worried." I felt a pang of guilt, not for what Max had done, but for the thought of family seeing him like this. "I know, Laura, but I got Mr. Doyle handling it. Everything will be fine. Just be careful," she said, voice tight. "It's hard to hear someone you love. I don't even know what to call it anymore." I hung up and let the silence of the house wrap around me. I realized that this ordeal was bigger than just the house. It was about trust, about what happens when the people we love most betray that trust. Max's world began to shrink around him. The neighbors, once friendly and chatty, now avoided his gaze. Even at work, where he had small connections, people hesitated when he entered the room. The rumor had reached the local coffee shop, the hardware store, even the library where he occasionally volunteered. I didn't revel in his shame. That wasn't my goal. I didn't want him humiliated. I wanted justice. But justice, I quickly learned, often carries its own weight of social consequence. The day of the temporary injunction hearing arrived. I dressed carefully, in muted colors, trying to look composed. Mr. Doyle reassured me as we drove downtown. "Just remember, Renata, stay calm. Speak clearly. Facts will do the talking. Your life, your house, your proof. They speak louder than any words of guilt or denial." I nodded, hands gripping my purse tightly. Inside the courtroom, Max sat across from me, flanked by his own lawyer. He avoided eye contact, fiddling with his tie, sweating slightly under the fluorescent lights. I could see the realization on his face. This wasn't just a conversation between mother and son anymore. This was public. This was law. This was consequence. When Mr. Doyle presented the evidence, the emails, the forged signatures, the purchase agreement, Max's shoulders slumped. His lawyer tried to argue technicalities, but it was impossible to hide the truth. The judge listened quietly, nodding occasionally, flipping through the documents with a neutral but discerning eye. Finally, after what felt like hours, the judge spoke. "The court finds sufficient evidence of forgery and misuse of power of attorney. The sale of the property is hereby frozen until further review. Further hearings will determine any additional consequences." I felt my chest loosen. I wasn't crying yet, but the tension in my shoulders began to melt. After the hearing, we walked back to the car. Max trailed behind, silent. I didn't say anything. There was nothing to say, not yet. Mr. Doyle walked with me to the driver's side, quietly saying, "You did the right thing. It's over for now, but stay vigilant. This is just the beginning of him facing the consequences." I nodded. I understand. That evening, I sat on the porch with a blanket around my shoulders. The house was quiet except for the wind rustling through the maple trees in the front yard. Max didn't speak. He didn't try to explain. He just lingered, somewhere between shame and regret, aware that the people he had betrayed now saw the truth. I watched him for a long while, feeling a complex mix of sorrow, relief, and sorrow again. He was my son, and yet he had made choices that had shaken my world. I realized something essential. Justice isn't about punishment. It's about accountability. Max had to face the results of his actions. I had to protect my life, my memories, and my dignity. In the days that followed, Max's social circle quietly shrank. Neighbors who once ignored subtle tensions now nodded politely in acknowledgement of my perseverance. The community respected that I had stood firm, that I had acted with courage instead of rage. Even Max's friends who reached out were careful, hesitant, aware that the line had been crossed. And through it all, I felt something I hadn't felt in years: control. Not over him, not over his life, but over myself, over my choices, my home, my future. Late Late one night, after Max had retreated to his room in silence, I sat at the kitchen table with my journal. I wrote about the fear, the betrayal, the legal fight, and the tiny victories. I wrote about my father's advice, about Peter's love, about the strength I had forgotten I possessed. And when I finally closed the journal, I looked around the house. It was still the same home, still filled with memories, still alive with echoes of the past. Max's betrayal had shaken me, yes, but it hadn't broken me. I realized then that the world outside could whisper, judge, even shame, but the truth of who I was, who I had been, and who I could be remained untouched. Because the hardest part wasn't the betrayal. It was learning how to forgive myself for ever trusting someone so blindly. The weeks that followed were quieter than I expected. Max moved like a shadow through the house, present but diminished. The tension between us hung in the air, invisible yet palpable, like a thin layer of dust settling over the rooms I had loved all my life. Mr. Doyle checked in regularly, guiding me through the next legal steps, advising me to document every interaction, to remain calm, and to prepare for the final hearings. And I did. I started to reclaim my routines. Mornings became my own again. Tea on the porch, watching the sun rise over the neighborhood, listening to the hum of life waking outside. I walked the garden, trimmed the roses Peter had planted, and let the smell of earth and flowers remind me of what I had built and what I had survived. For the first time in months, I felt rooted again. Max tried. I won't lie, there were small gestures. He brought in groceries, tried to help with chores, even apologized quietly, saying things he must have rehearsed 1,000 times. I didn't mean to hurt you, Mom. I thought I knew what was best. I nodded. Sometimes I said, I know. Sometimes I stayed silent. Forgiveness wasn't immediate. It was a process. And for the first time, I understood that forgiveness wasn't about letting him off the hook. It was about freeing myself. The final hearing came, and the courtroom felt smaller, quieter, intimate in a way that made my heart beat loud in my ears. Max sat across from me, tense, silent, stripped of the casual arrogance he had worn like a shield. His lawyer tried to argue technicalities again, but this time it was different. We had evidence, witnesses, and the moral weight of truth on our side. When the judge ruled, the words felt like air returning to my lungs. The sale of the property is permanently nullified. The house remains under the ownership of Ms. Renata Turner. The court acknowledges the fraudulent actions of Max Turner, and further actions may be taken if necessary. I blinked back tears. My hands gripped the arms of the chair, trembling, not with fear this time, but with relief and a sense of triumph that wasn't cruel or vengeful. That evening, I walked through the house, touching the walls, the furniture, the little things that made it home. The smell of Peter's favorite candle lingered faintly on the mantel. The old armchair by the fireplace, where we had spent so many winters together, remained my refuge. I allowed myself to breathe in deeply, to feel the weight lift off my chest. Max stood silently in the corner, avoiding my eyes. I'm sorry, he said, his voice low, almost broken. I nodded. I know. That was enough. Not a full reconciliation. Not yet, but a beginning. Over the next few months, I focused on rebuilding my life. I reconnected with old friends, joined a small book club, and started volunteering at a local community center. I learned to balance caution with openness, to trust carefully but not blindly, to honor my past while protecting my present. Max, too, seemed to change. He became quieter, reflective, more aware of the consequences of his actions. It was a slow, uneven road, but there was a glimmer of hope that we could rebuild some measure of trust. One evening, I sat on the porch with my journal again. The wind carried the faint scent of roses from the garden. I traced my fingers over the notebook, writing about lessons learned, strength discovered, and the resilience that comes from standing up for yourself even when it hurts the people you love. I realized that life doesn't always give us the stories we expect. Sometimes it gives us betrayal, heartbreak, and fear. But it also gives us courage, clarity, and the power to reclaim what is ours without losing our integrity or our heart. I thought about Peter, about the life we built together, and about the family I still had the chance to nurture, even if it wasn't in the way I had imagined. I realized that owning a home isn't just about the building itself. It's about the memories, the love, the laughter, the pain, and the lessons embedded in every brick and every corner. And that, I decided, was something no one could ever take away from me. Not Max, not circumstance, not even time. In the months that followed, I made small changes to the house, not because I needed to, but because I wanted to. I repainted a room that had been Peter's study, rearranged furniture, planted new flowers alongside the old roses. The house became a testament to survival, to resilience, and to the quiet, enduring power of a life lived fully, honestly, and bravely. Max started contributing in small ways too, not as an equal partner, not yet, but as someone learning humility and responsibility. Our relationship remained fragile, but it was real, honest, and for the first time since Peter passed, I felt a sense of balance return. I often sit on the porch in the evening, watching the sun dip behind the trees. I feel the cool breeze, hear the faint laughter of children from down the street, and remember the trials that brought me here. The betrayal, the fear, the legal battles, they were chapters of a story I never wanted to live but had to. And in the end, I emerged stronger, wiser, and more aware of my own strength than I had ever been. Because sometimes, losing trust teaches you how to find yourself again, and that lesson lasts far longer than any betrayal. Sitting here now, I think about all all the moments that brought me to this point, both the pain and the growth. Life has a way of testing us, of showing us who people really are, and sometimes it even forces us to see who we really are beneath the fear and the love. I could have let anger consume me. I could have held grudges forever, letting Max's betrayal shadow every corner of my home, my heart, my life. But I didn't. I chose to act, to reclaim what was mine, to protect the life my husband and I had built. And in doing so, I found something I hadn't realized was missing. My own strength, my own voice, my own peace. Perhaps the hardest lesson of all is this: trust is precious, but so is self-respect. And sometimes, loving someone doesn't mean letting them hurt you. Sometimes, love means standing firm, even when it's your child, even when it's someone you never thought could betray you. I hope that if you've ever felt betrayed, or taken for granted, or forced to question your own judgment, you remember this. You are allowed to protect yourself. You are allowed to fight for your dignity. And you are allowed to rise again, even when the world feels unfair. So I ask you, dear listener, would you have found the courage to confront the betrayal in your own life? Would you have stood up, even when it was the hardest thing you've ever done? If my story teaches even one person that they can reclaim their life, their home, and their peace, then every tear, every fear, every sleepless night was worth it. And as always, if you felt connected to this story, consider subscribing to hear more real-life experiences, stories of resilience, and lessons we can all carry forward. Because sometimes, the bravest thing we can do is simply stand up and say, "This is my life, and I will not let it be stolen."